The alarm screamed before I even understood what was happening. My ship was falling, spinning, the metal around me groaning like something alive and dying at the same time. Sparks fell from the ceiling panels. My restraints cut into my shoulders as the world outside the window turned from black to orange to a blinding white heat. I had seconds, maybe less, before the hull gave way completely. I am Vesa. I was a scout, sent to study a world my people had only ever heard about in warnings. A world of a species called humans. My instructors told me they were violent, unpredictable, dangerous beyond reason. I did not choose to land there. My ship chose it for me, torn apart by debris in the upper atmosphere, dragging me down toward a planet I had been taught to fear. The crash threw me clear of the wreckage before it hit the ground. I remember tumbling through cold air, then snow, then darkness. When I opened my eyes again, my ship was a smoking ruin half buried in a frozen field, and I was alone, injured, and completely unprepared for what came next. My suit was torn at the shoulder, letting the freezing air bite into my skin. My scanner was dead. My communicator was crushed under a piece of the hull I had not been fast enough to avoid. I had no way to call for help, no way to know if anyone was even looking for me, and no way to survive many more nights in this cold without shelter. I crawled away from the wreck as fast as my injured leg allowed, terrified that the crash had been loud enough to draw attention. My instructor's warnings echoed through my mind with every step. Humans hunt what they do not understand. Humans do not show mercy to strangers. Humans will use any excuse to destroy what threatens them, and a crashed alien ship would certainly count as a threat. I found an old stone structure at the edge of a field, half collapsed, smelling of dust and dried grain. It gave me a place to hide from the wind, though not from the cold. I pressed myself into the darkest corner and tried to slow my breathing, tried to become as small and silent as possible, the way scouts are trained to do when the odds turn against them. 3 days passed like that. 3 days of hunger clawing at my stomach, of cold sinking so deep into my bones that I stopped shivering and started feeling strangely calm, which I now know is a dangerous sign. My leg had stopped bleeding, but it had also stopped healing properly, swollen and stiff beneath the torn fabric of my suit. I told myself I could last a little longer. I told myself help might still come. I did not fully believe either thing. On the 4th night, I heard footsteps outside. They were slow, careful, deliberate. Not the frantic movement of someone searching in panic, and not the aggressive stomp of someone hunting. Just steady footsteps in the snow, coming closer to the old stone building where I hid. I froze completely. Every instinct telling me to disappear into the shadows and stay silent no matter what happened next. If this was a human, and my instructors were right about them, then being found meant being hurt, or worse. I had no weapon, no strength left to run, and no plan beyond hoping the footsteps would pass by without stopping. They stopped right outside the entrance. A light swept across the broken doorway, then the darkness inside. I saw the shape of a person standing there, tall, wrapped in a heavy coat, breath rising in clouds in the freezing air. He held the light steady when it landed on me, and for a long, terrifying moment, neither of us moved. I bared my teeth, the only defense I had left, and prepared for the worst. He did not attack. He did not even raise his voice. He lowered the light so it was not shining directly in my eyes, and he spoke in a calm, steady tone that did not match anything I had been taught to expect. His name, I would learn, was Noah. He told me later that he had heard the crash 3 nights earlier from his farmhouse a few miles away, had seen the light in the sky, and had been searching the fields ever since, convinced something out there needed help before the cold took it. That night he did not try to touch me or force me anywhere. He simply crouched down at a distance, keeping his hands visible, and told me he had food and warmth back at his home if I wanted it, and that I was free to stay exactly where I was if I did not trust him yet. I did not trust him. Every part of my training told me this was exactly how a predator would behave before closing in. I stayed pressed against the stone wall, watching him, waiting for the moment his calm voice would turn into something else. That moment never came. He simply waited with me in the cold for what felt like hours, talking quietly about nothing important, the weather, the farm, anything to fill the silence without demanding a response. Eventually, my body made the decision my mind refused to make. The cold and hunger became too much, and I crawled toward him, more out of desperation than trust. He wrapped a blanket around my shoulders without hesitation, careful not to touch my injured side, and helped me walk the long distance back to his home. Every step, I expected him to change, to reveal some hidden cruelty. Every step, he simply supported my weight and told me we were almost there. His home was warm in a way I had forgotten was possible. A fire burned in a stone hearth, filling the room with a heat that felt like it was melting the ice directly out of my bones. He set me down near it, and brought a thick blanket, then disappeared into another room, and returned with bread, warm broth, and a small first aid kit that looked nothing like the emergency supplies on my ship, but seemed to be exactly what my leg needed. I did not eat at first, certain the food was somehow a trick. He noticed my hesitation and, without a word, ate a spoonful from the same pot himself before offering the rest to me. It was such a simple gesture, but it broke something in my resistance. If the food was dangerous, he would not have eaten it too. I ate slowly, watching him the entire time, waiting for any sign of the cruelty my training insisted was coming. He simply sat across from me, tending the fire, occasionally glancing over to check that I was warm enough, saying nothing that demanded gratitude or explanation. Over the following days, he cleaned and treated the wound on my leg with a gentleness that confused me more than any violence could have. He did not ask what species I was or where I had come from, at least not right away. He seemed more concerned with whether I was warm, whether I had eaten, whether the pain in my leg was getting better or worse. It was on the 5th day, while he was changing the bandage on my leg, that a knock came at the door, sharp and urgent, followed by a voice calling his name. I panicked immediately, certain this was the moment everything would go wrong. I tried to pull away, to hide, but my injured leg gave out beneath me. Noah caught me before I fell, then quickly guided me behind a large wooden cabinet in the corner of the room, pressing a finger to his lips. He answered the door, and I heard a woman's voice, urgent and worried. Her name was Grace, a neighbor from a nearby farm, and she was warning him that strange lights had been seen in the sky a few nights earlier, and that men from the nearest town were organizing a search, convinced something dangerous had landed nearby and needed to be found and dealt with. My heart pounded so hard I was certain they could hear it through the walls. This was exactly what my instructors had warned about, a crashed alien, discovered by humans, hunted down out of fear. Noah kept his voice calm and steady, telling Grace he had seen the lights too, but had found nothing when he searched, and that it was probably just some kind of weather phenomenon, nothing to worry about. Grace did not sound entirely convinced, but she trusted him enough to let it go, warning him to be careful anyway before she left. When the door closed, Noah returned to where I was hiding, crouched down, and asked quietly if I was all right. I realized in that moment that he had just lied to protect me, to a neighbor he clearly trusted, without a moment of hesitation. I asked him why. Why risk trouble with his own people to protect a stranger who might, for all he knew, be exactly the danger they feared? He told me that fear makes people say and do things they do not fully understand, and that just because a crowd is afraid of something does not mean that fear is correct. He said he would rather take the time to understand something strange than destroy it out of panic, and that seemed to be a difference that mattered to him more than most things. I did not have an answer for that. It did not match anything my training had prepared me to hear from a human. Over the next several days I grew stronger, my leg healing steadily under his care. I began to help around his home in small ways, gathering wood for the fire, organizing tools in his workshop, tasks that felt strange and unfamiliar, but gave me something to focus on besides my fear. No one never asked me to do these things. I simply found myself wanting to, as if some part of me had decided to trust him before the rest of me caught up. It was on a cold evening, nearly 2 weeks after the crash, that everything nearly fell apart. I was outside gathering firewood near the edge of the property when I heard voices approaching from the road, several men, their tones sharp and determined in a way that made my stomach twist with fear. I recognized the danger immediately and rushed back toward the house, but before I could reach the door, one of the men spotted me in the fading light. He shouted for the others, and within moments, 3 men were moving quickly across the field toward me, one of them carrying a rifle slung over his shoulder. My leg, though healed enough to walk, was not strong enough to outrun them, and there was nowhere to hide in the open field. Noah burst out of the house at the sound of the shouting, moving faster than I had ever seen him move, placing himself directly between me and the approaching men before they could reach me. He held up his hands, calling out for them to stop, telling them there was no danger here, that they had made a mistake. The lead man, a broad-shouldered figure named Daniel, did not lower his rifle, his eyes fixed on me with a mixture of fear and suspicion that made my whole body go cold with dread. Daniel demanded to know what I was, accusing Noah of hiding something dangerous, something that had no business being on this land. The other 2 men shifted nervously behind him, clearly frightened but following his lead. Noah did not raise his voice, but his tone carried a firmness I had not heard from him before. He told them that I was injured, frightened, and had done nothing to threaten anyone since the moment I arrived. He said that pointing a weapon at someone simply because they looked different was not caution, it was cruelty dressed up as fear. and he would not allow it to happen on his land. Daniel hesitated, his rifle wavering slightly, but his suspicion had not fully faded. He argued that they could not simply trust a stranger's word about something so unknown, that the safety of the town depended on making the right decision now, before it was too late. I felt something shift inside me in that moment, a fear so deep it briefly overpowered even my terror of the men in front of me. I could not let Noah stand alone in front of a weapon because of me, not after everything he had done since the night he found me freezing in that old stone building. I stepped out from behind him, my legs shaking, and spoke for the first time to someone other than Noah since the crash. My voice was unsteady, but I told them the truth. I told them I had crashed here by accident, that I meant no harm to anyone, that all I wanted was to survive long enough to find a way home, and that the only kindness I had found on this entire world had come from the man standing in front of me, trying to protect a stranger from people who had already decided to be afraid of her. Silence fell over the field. Daniel stared at me for a long moment, his rifle slowly lowering as the tension in his shoulders eased slightly. He did not apologize, and he did not smile, but something in his expression shifted from suspicion toward uncertainty, which felt, in that moment, like the beginning of understanding. Grace arrived then, hurrying across the field, having heard the commotion from her own home nearby. She took in the scene quickly, the men, the rifle, Noah standing protectively in front of me, and she did something I had not expected. She walked directly past the men and stood beside Noah, facing the group with a calm authority that seemed to shame the tension out of the air. She reminded them that Noah had lived among them for years, had helped every one of them at some point, and had never once given them a reason to doubt his judgment. She asked them plainly whether they truly believed he would knowingly bring danger to the community he had spent his whole life caring for. The men exchanged uncertain glances. Daniel lowered his rifle fully, muttering something about caution and safety, but the fight had gone out of his voice. Slowly, the three of them turned and walked back toward the road, leaving without another word, though I could tell their fear had not entirely disappeared, only paused. Grace turned to me then, studying me with open curiosity rather than fear, and asked simply if I was all right. It was such a small question, but it meant more to me than she could have known. In the days that followed, word of what had happened spread quietly through the small community, though not in the way I feared. Grace, it turned out, had a way of shaping stories with calm honesty, and instead of panic, curiosity began to take root among the people nearby. A few came to meet me cautiously, keeping their distance at first, watching how Noah and Grace treated me before deciding how they felt themselves. I remained cautious with each new face, my training still whispering warnings in the back of my mind, but each small kindness chipped away at those warnings a little more. An elderly man named Edward brought extra blankets one evening, saying little, simply nodding before leaving. A young woman named Hannah, curious rather than afraid, asked careful questions about where I came from, listening with genuine interest rather than judgment. Weeks passed, and my leg healed fully, though the deeper wound, the fear my instructors had built into me since childhood, took much longer to close. Slowly, I began to understand that Noah was not an exception among his people, but rather an example of what they were capable of being when fear did not get to decide everything for them. One evening, as we sat by the fire that had become so familiar to me, I finally asked Noah why he had risked everything to help me that first night, when he had every reason to be afraid of a stranger who fell from the sky in the middle of a snowstorm. He thought about the question for a long moment before answering. He said that fear was easy, that anyone could look at something unfamiliar and decide to destroy it before understanding it, and that this kind of fear had caused more harm throughout history than almost anything else. He said that kindness, real kindness, meant choosing to help even when you were afraid, even when you did not fully understand what you were helping, because the alternative was a world where nothing new or different was ever given a chance. I asked him if he had ever regretted that choice, given everything that had happened with Daniel and the others in the field. He shook his head without hesitation, saying that the only thing he would have regretted was leaving me to freeze in that field out of fear of what people might think or say. He said some choices are worth the risk, and helping someone who needed it was always one of them. I did not have a word in my own language for what he was describing, but I understood it now in a way I never had before. It was not weakness, as my instructors had always framed such gestures. It was a kind of strength that did not need to prove itself through force or dominance, a strength built entirely on the willingness to be kind even when kindness carried risk. Eventually, using pieces salvaged from my ship and the tools available in Noah's workshop, I managed to repair enough of my communicator to send a distress signal that my people could receive. It took time, patience, and no small amount of trial and error, but Noah helped every step of the way. never once suggesting that fixing my ship meant I needed to leave immediately, never making me feel like a burden he was eager to be rid of. When the signal finally connected and I received word that a rescue ship was on its way, I felt a strange mixture of relief and sadness that I had not expected. This place, this small farmhouse and the community around it, had become somewhere I no longer wanted to leave, despite everything my training had once told me to fear about it. On the night before the rescue ship arrived, Noah and I sat together by the fire one last time, the same fire that had first thawed the ice from my bones weeks earlier. I told him that I did not know how to properly thank him for everything he had done, for choosing kindness over fear, for standing between me and danger without hesitation, for treating me not as a stranger to be feared but as someone worth helping simply because I needed it. He told me that no thanks were necessary, that he had only done what he believed anyone should do when they found someone cold, hungry, and alone. He said that if my rescue meant anything at all beyond simply getting me home safely, he hoped it meant I would carry a different story back to my people than the one they had taught me before I ever set foot on this world. I promised him I would. When the rescue ship finally landed in the same field where my own ship had crashed weeks earlier, I stood beside Noah, Grace, and a small gathering of others who had come to know me during those difficult weeks. There was no fear in their faces anymore, only a quiet curiosity and, in some, genuine warmth. I boarded the ship slowly, looking back one last time at the people who had changed everything I believed about their world. My instructors had told me humans were something to be feared above all else. Instead, I had found cold nights turned warm, hunger turned into shared meals, and fear turned slowly, carefully, into trust. I carried that truth back to my people, telling them again and again that the stories they had been taught were incomplete at best, and simply wrong at worst. I told them about a man who found a stranger freezing in the snow and chose warmth over fear, about a woman who stood beside him without hesitation when danger arrived, about a community that learned, slowly and imperfectly, to replace suspicion with understanding. I was cold, hungry, and utterly alone when I fell from the sky onto a world I had been taught to fear. One person, one simple choice to help instead of harm, changed everything I believed about that world, and about what it truly means to be kind when kindness is hardest to give.